Hey everyone, and welcome back. Now today we're going to be talking about Solana because I think it's worth discussing what's actually going on with Solana because I think it's the worst performing of all the major crypto altcoins that we've seen in the past month or so. And so it kind of begs the question, has Solana's time in the sun ended, or is it just waiting for another rally? Right now we're just going through a period of disillusionment, things like that, kind of like what we saw a couple months ago with Ethereum. Everyone thought Ethereum was dead, it was terrible, it was down 50% from its highs in March, yada yada yada, on, and then boom, it's all the way, it's all of a sudden back at its old previous highs. And so I wanted to kind of discuss a little bit about that, why Solana might be struggling a little bit, what we could see potentially out of the future of Solana, looking at some of the stats, all that type of stuff. So anyway, let's go ahead and dive right in. So starting out, we can obviously see a relatively mixed day in the market. It looks better than yesterday. Yesterday, basically everything was down kind of wholesale. We are seeing a pretty solid mix through here. We can see Hex move, Virtual, which is covered by my picture, but it is down here. Pengu, Arrow, Hype, kind of being the ones leading the way down. And then we have a couple leading the way up: HBAR, Uniswap, BTT, Algo, Bonk. Those are probably the biggest ones kind of leading the move to the upside. But as we can see, obviously the moves to the downside are bigger than the moves to the upside, though just looking at kind of the overall colors of the crypto bubbles, we can see there are more moves to the upside. They're just much smaller in magnitude. And so overall, I mean, things looking pretty decent, I guess we could say. On the day, not too much happening. If we look at the week though, we can still see things down pretty heavily on the week. About probably a 25 to 30% average pullback just kind of throughout the market. Obviously we have some down less, we have some down more, but overall the market average probably seems to be around the 25-ish% range if I had to kind of take a quick guess without going and calculating it all. But overall, pretty rough week in crypto, I would say. I think this is cooling the market off pretty heavily, which I think ultimately is a pretty good thing. We can see Solana down just 18.5% just this week, but overall, looking at the month, still tons of greens. We can see more reds entering into the picture here. There was a while where basically it was only greens, and it was only greens up absolutely massively. Right now we can see there are obviously a lot more reds in here. We can see Solana almost 30% down over the past month. Not a great sign to see. We'll look at the chart here in a second to kind of look at that a little bit more. But yeah, Solana obviously not doing well at all. We can see virtuals here, again, kind of blocked by my picture a little bit, up 336% this month. Definitely the winner of the month. Jasmy being another one. We've been talking about Jasmy for months on the channel. That one's been doing really quite well. Helium, another personal favorite of mine, doing pretty decently over the past month. Overall, things on the crypto bubbles looking decent. If we go and look at the cryptocurrency price charts, we can see a couple of different things. We can see, if we look at the 30-day performance, Solana is definitely kind of far and away the worst performer, even outside of the top probably 13 or 14. Dogecoin obviously not doing particularly well either, but Solana the worst of all of them. And so not necessarily the greatest thing. If we do look at the Solana chart specifically, we can see basically it made a pretty decent run up from about, basically right after the US election all the way up to a top in just before Thanksgiving, 22nd, 23rd of November is kind of where we saw that top, breaching all-time highs in price, which is good. As I mentioned in the video yesterday, we did breach all-time highs in market cap back here just because of that dilutive effect, but we did also breach all-time highs in price too. Since we broke all-time highs, we have seen a pretty aggressive sell-off, going from the highs of about $263 all the way down to about $180, where it looks like we might be leveling off here. We can see we do have a little bit of support and resistance here. Again, as I've mentioned previously in the past, these lines should not be viewed as hard and fast stops, meaning that because we broke here, this level of support has been broken. So if I were to be drawing something similar down here, it would probably be a rectangle similar to this. We can see, obviously we have these two lines kind of close. This is just kind of a rough range. I obviously picked the top line because it was closer to some of these range tops up here, but we can see now with this kind of box that we've drawn, we can see we've found the wicks down in this one, we found the wicks down over in here, see some of the bottoms here, we found the wicks up to some of these reaches to the upside, we found the wicks down here. This is kind of a more reliable, I would say, range of support, rather than just a hard and fast bright line, this is where it is, because it really never works that way. And this one's probably an even more obvious example. We can see there's not really a hard point of support or resistance, or you could call it here because of these, 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 but there's also a ton of wicks on each of these candles. So for me, it's between the $211 to like $228 range. This is all kind of just like a pretty strong liquidity zone. So anything kind of in this area, you could imagine to see it stop kind of at any point, because we have seen it stop kind of at any point up until this point. So that's kind of how I like to look at it. This is kind of my general sense of the chart of kind of what we're looking at right now. I'll delete a couple things just to kind of clean it up a little bit so we can see maybe a little bit clearer picture. Looking at the Bollinger Bands, we can see that we basically saw it running and hitting kind of the upper bounds of the Bollinger Bands on this run up, and now we're basically seeing it hit and even dip below the lower bands of this Bollinger Band. So obviously not a really great thing to see. However, as we've talked about before, is usually when we see something like this happen, it does always come back to the mean. The mean is currently sitting at 217, but as you can see, it's quickly adjusting back down. So this is something where, you know, if we start to see price kind of stop out here, and this is the level of support that we find for Solana, we could maybe potentially see it bounce back closer to the 200, 210 range, which is probably where this mean will be as it starts to kind of come back further down. But overall, price not looking great for Solana. So I want to talk a little bit about that, just in kind of looking at some of the data, some of the stats, some of the like narratives that we had seen previously in the cycle, all of this type of stuff. But before we do that, if you are looking to trade Solana, Bitcoin, Ethereum, really anything for that matter, you can feel free to use my BTCC link in the description below. I am working with them for another month, and they have continued this 10% bonus on first time deposits if you use my link in the description, which is a really, really good deal. I mean, it's basically 10% free money. This is in addition to the bonuses of up to $10,055 per user that you would be getting anyway. So this is essentially, like I said, just 10% free money that if you are looking for a new place to trade, it is a pretty great offer. So something that you can consider if you are looking. Also, they've been around for 13 years, so you don't necessarily need to worry about kind of the here today, gone tomorrow type of crypto exchange that I'm sure we've all seen a ton of times before, and you do need to be very careful of. Given that they've been around and have such a strong track record, I feel obviously there's always a risk, right? But I feel pretty comfortable with what we've seen so far from BTCC. Also, they have 300 plus crypto futures, so if there's anything that you're looking to trade, they probably have it. They also have tokenized stocks and commodities, which I think is pretty cool. So if you're looking to kind of stay exposed to some of the more TradFi type of stuff, you can do that within BTCC as well. Also, up to 500x leverage. Again, I would strongly discourage this level of leverage. In my opinion, this is gambling. And honestly, it's probably even worse than gambling, because at least at gambling, the odds are like close to 50-50. In my opinion, this is just like almost certain to liquidate you unless you get really, really, really lucky. But again, you may have some strategy that I don't know, and maybe that works for you. But from my personal opinion, I would not be doing anything that high. Also, no VPN or KYC necessary if that is something that you're interested in. Now, moving on, I want to take a quick look at DeFi Llama, because there's a lot of things that we can look at here to kind of assess the strength of Solana. And also, I want to talk just a little bit more kind of high level about what is going on in Solana. So first off, let's take a look at TVL. We've seen there's about $8 billion in TVL. All-time high sitting at over 10 billion in TVL. Recent kind of range highs we saw at about 9.4 billion in TVL. So, you know, obviously we've seen a decent pullback from there. Not a huge pullback. I mean, things are looking, I would say, pretty good, pretty stable. The ecosystem that Solana is creating is pretty healthy and I would say somewhat resilient to kind of things like this. The other thing we can see is stablecoins. Stablecoins have continued to move up even though we've seen TVL drop, which in my opinion is a good thing. We have to keep in mind that TVL dropping is in very large part and usually mostly due to fluctuations of the base asset, in this case, which would be Solana. So having stablecoins on the chain really do help kind of buoy TVL at least a little bit, because there's, you know, I don't think stablecoins are actually considered in TVL, but they're around at least as like a, you know, a way to keep money interacted and busy, I guess you could say, within the ecosystem. So as I've said before, stablecoins is always a really, really great place to look in terms of like how things are doing on chain. And so we can see that, you know, stablecoin values are continuing to stay pretty strong and maybe even increase a little bit. We can see they're not actually to the highs of what we saw prior to in like the 2022-2023 bull run. That was about 6.25 billion in stablecoins. We saw obviously almost all of that get pulled out, primarily when we had that FTX issue. We dropped down to lows of about 1.5 billion and have since climbed back up to where we're sitting right now at just shy of 5 billion. So things looking pretty good there. I'm going to start to change the chart so we can see things a little bit better here. But what we can see next though, looking at the green, is we can see that volume has spiked pretty aggressively and honestly stayed pretty high. Obviously we saw these kind of wild days where we go all the way up to like 7 billion, but the average, I would say, you know, we kind of went from like around to below 1 billion kind of for like most of 2024. We saw a really nice like move to the upside, and now kind of the floor seems to be kind of around like the 3-ish billion range. So depending on kind of where we find the average and what we look at that, anywhere from probably 100 to 200% growth in terms of kind of like volume on chain, which is really, really good. Obviously, that's something that we're always looking to see. The other thing I want to take a look at here is revenue, because revenue is also something that's very important for the chain, right? Obviously, when we saw so much insanity happening back in 2022, there was almost no revenue actually happening on chain. The chain was hemorrhaging money, all this type of stuff. But what we've seen recently is revenue's actually really started to kick up in a pretty big way. And this, in my opinion, is one of the most important things, because we obviously need the chain to be self-sufficient at some point in time. Right now, obviously they've got a ton of like venture money, and there's a lot of things that they can use essentially to like cover the burn that's happening on chain, but that's not going to happen forever, right? Obviously there needs to be a point at which revenue expenses seem to level out. And this type of movement in revenue, in my opinion, is really good to see, because we can start to maybe see some early signs of that. I think revenue is going to need to grow probably an order of magnitude at least in order till they get break even. But this is this is good to see, right? Obviously the growth is very, very obvious to see. We're seeing some pretty wild spikes here and there, but overall, like the trend is moving in the right direction, and that's ultimately what we're wanting to see on a chain that is going to be healthy and sustainable for the long term. So that's kind of what we're seeing as far as like metrics and kind of fundamental data on the Solana blockchain. Things looking good. I would say things looking even better than they were a month ago, yet price is down. What is that, like 40% in the past month? So something that it's always like, when we see this, it's an interesting kind of point to like reassess your convictions and also just reassess the investment as a whole. Because what we have seen, at least in the past, is less than a month ago, or about a month ago, we saw that people were willing to pay $263 per Solana. Now people are only willing to pay $180 per Solana. From a purely fundamental perspective, this looks like a bargain, right? I mean, things looking really, really good in terms of essentially like buying a good priced Solana. I do think that there is a possibility, and I think it's actually likely, that we do see new highs this cycle for Solana, and it's probably going to be within the $600 to $800 range is my guess. Again, anything could happen. We could have seen the highs. It could only hit 300, could only hit 400. We have no idea of knowing for sure, but I do think, $600 to 800 range, at least from what I've been over in the past and what I've been seeing in the past, looks reasonable to me. Now, what we need to talk about though is why have we seen such a large pullback on Solana? And part of my opinions as to why this could be is a couple of different things. One, there was a lot of hype and mania on Solana kind of earlier on in the cycle. We've seen Solana make some astounding moves to the upside, and so I think there's kind of a level of people kind of assessing the Solana investment and thinking about, okay, well, is this still kind of the highest ROI investment? After we saw Solana run up, that's when we started to see Sui start to do really, really well. And so I think some of the like really, really early adopters probably started to take their Solana positions and move them into Sui and other type of like super early investments that they could do quite well on. I think that's kind of one piece of it. The other piece is this is all purely speculation of mine, but recently in this cycle, we saw a lot of people being like, oh, meme coins are culture, meme coins are the next thing, that, you guys used to think that meme coins were trash, but now they're not, now they're cool, all this type of stuff. Yeah, sure. I do think there's a level of like meme coins, being maybe having a more outsized level of importance than what they did in the past. However, I do think that like there could be a level of disillusionment with Solana as people have kind of jumped into Solana, tried trading meme coins, all this type of stuff. I don't know if any of you have tried trading meme coins, but like it is almost impossible to like not find a meme coin rug. I feel like meme coins are getting rugged absolutely constantly. If you're trying to find a micro cap that like does, peanut type level returns or bonk type level returns that we saw last year or stuff like that, like if you're really trying to make 100, 500,000x, all that type of stuff, like it is almost impossible to find one just because of there's so many rugs in the space, and it's just something like no one even cares about. Obviously, we had some of the pump.fun kind of debacle that we saw a couple months back, where people were doing increasingly unhinged stuff to try and make a couple grand on their pump.fun token. So I mean, there's a lot of kind of crazy stuff going on there. And I think this could kind of be the point of like a little bit of like disillusionment, I guess we could call it, where people are like, well, maybe meme coins aren't all they cracked up to be, because at least a couple months prior, people were like, oh, meme coins are it, meme coins are next, this is a meme coin super cycle, all that type of stuff. Whenever you start to hear people talking like that, it's not a guarantee that like price is going to go down or we've hit the top, but it usually sends like a little bit of some warning signals for kind of where the market could be, because again, usually the majority of the market is wrong. And so that's kind of something that I've been thinking about in terms of Solana overall, from like a fundamental perspective, and from what we've seen out of Solana. I think this pullback is fair. Like, I think Solana was getting a little bit overblown. There was a lot of like really strong price appreciation action, all this type of stuff happening. This type of cooldown I actually think is probably good for Solana over the longer term. And I do think, like, I still believe that we will probably see a continuation on Solana up to the $600-800 range if we kind of see the cycle unfold, at least how it started to unfold. Obviously, there's still a lot of stuff that needs to happen between now and then, but at least based on the start, like, we're off to a very strong and solid start. And so if we kind of continue on this path, I think there's very much a way that we see that. So those are kind of my thoughts on Solana. Hopefully you found the information in this video useful. If you did, please do give me a like and subscribe, because it really does help me out. Also, if you have any comments, questions, concerns, anything like that, just feel free to drop those in the comment section below. I do try to read and respond to all of those, so if you have anything you want me to see, that would be a great way to do that. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next video.